Councilmember Kremen and then Knutzen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been chastised and vilified and other things over the last several months because of my early involvement and support and efforts to culminate what I think is one of the most visionary things that will be beneficial for this greater community for centuries. And I understand some of the opposition, but I can tell you that my support and my efforts to try to realize this reconveyance was because I think it is a rare and golden opportunity for this community to acquire a significant part of the Lake Whatcom watershed. Between 1/4 and 1/3 of the entire watershed would be acquired at $32.90 per acre that we've already spent, or almost already spent. We still have, as the Parks Department Director said, we still have about $70,000 left to culminate the transaction. And this two massive areas that total 8,844 acres will, in not the too much distant future, wind up being a reconstituted old-growth forest. And that canopy provided by this old-growth forest will be the best, most effective way to minimize and restrict the infiltration of significant amounts of rainfall that we get every year, sometimes more, sometimes less. But everyone knows around here, certain times of the year we get significant amounts of rainfall. And it's that rainfall that saturates the ground, causes runoff, and ultimately phosphorus loading into the watershed that is the biggest problem with Lake Whatcom. Now, is logging the biggest culprit for that phosphorus loading? Absolutely not. Not even close. But it is important to reduce that phosphorus loading. It is the most acute problem facing the health and the survivability of Lake Whatcom. A side benefit, and it was not the driver for me, are the rare recreational opportunities so close to an urban area. I mean, someone said here today that it would be the 8th largest park in the United States. And even if you add up all the monies that it's going to cost, the $291,000 to, culminate the actual transaction, the $130,000 to $150,000 a year to maintain, the $550,000 to construct and realize the approximate 55 miles of trails that would not only be trails themselves, but would add value to the existing areas within the Lake Whatcom watershed that already exist, would provide connectivity to the Olson Reserve and Stimson, etc. And it will be for posterity, forever. And Whatcom County will control that, and it's the same kind of vision that the individuals that were responsible for setting aside what is now Central Park in New York, only on a much more grand scale. But that's just a side benefit that is also going to help have a more vibrant economy. You know, the people that drink the water, everybody's talking about whether they drink Bellingham water or they don't. Well, let me tell you, we not only need clean, safe drinking water for our residents, but we need it for our businesses too. Without clean water, we're not going to have a thriving, viable economy here. So the benefits are great, and this is a rare and golden opportunity. The impacts to the logging industry, I am so sensitive to the logging industry. I mean, my first campaign brochure in 1984 had about 4 pictures in it. And one of those pictures was a picture of John and Selene Zender. My treasurer that year, and for several elections afterward, was Dale Zender. One of my dearest friends, or close friend, and one of my wife's closest friend, is highly involved in the logging industry, and they are some of the most vocal opponents of the reconveyance. But on the whole scheme of things, even if you take the figure of 4,000 loggable acres, which I think is a bit high. Some people say it's anywhere from 2,200 acres to 4,000. You know, I'd say maybe 3,500 acres on a 65-year rotation is only going to enable 55 acres a year to be logged. I mean, the financial impact to the logging industry really is almost not discernible. And by the way, only about 10%, or maybe a little more, 10% of the logs that have been harvested in the Lake Whatcom watershed are being processed in Skagit County because it's logistically more viable and financially feasible. So, and remember, as Councilmember Crawford has already said, we have more than $6 million in the Conservation Futures Fund, and that's what's going to pay for almost all of this. $6 million today, and an ongoing revenue generation stream of $1.1 to $1.2 million on an annual basis. Now, County Council, a few years ago, voted to increase the tax for conservation futures. And I knew at that time that we didn't need it. And history has proven me right. I vetoed that tax increase on the conservation futures because I had the taxpayers' wallets and purses in mind. And by the way, we heard a lot of people talk about their property taxes being increased. Whatcom County has not increased the general fund property taxes. The county's portion, we only have control over the county's portion, which is about 10%. Most of the money the reason you have increasing property taxes is because your fire districts, your school districts, and levies that's what's causing your property taxes to increase, not more parks. The parks, we have an adequate, ample supply of money to acquire and to maintain our park system. So I'm proud of the fact that I started in, I think, 2006 on this journey that hopefully is going to be culminated tonight, or at least as far as the council's involvement is concerned. And I'm very proud to have worked with a lot of individuals. Our Parks Department Director, Mr. McFarland, ran Jack with the Land Trust and others who see the value and the importance of this golden opportunity that the people 100, 150, 200 years from now are going to say, boy, we're sure lucky that there were individuals who had the vision and foresight to protect this land for posterity.
Councilmember Mann invited rebuttal, and I've been patiently waiting to do. If we need to go to meetings with the DNR together ever again, because it seems like we hear totally different things. You said they came with no money and no plan, and I heard just the opposite, that the state legislature has funded their program for the last couple of years, and it looks like it will be funded again this year. And I'm looking at Whatcom County we have no money and no plan. The only money we had was $1.5 million that, as near as I can tell, was purposely hidden in another account until Councilmember Brenner and the state auditor exposed it and told us to transfer it back where it belonged. So I would say the county is the one that had no money or no plan. It seems like it's a revolving plan. It's going to be horse riding. It's going to be mountain biking. It's going to be whatever you want it to be. And with that, I don't know how many recreation plans we've put together like the DNR has throughout the state, but what they showed us throughout in their presentation was substantial with all the recreation opportunities that you have throughout the state on DNR property. And then the other thing you said was something about having to sue one state agency. To my knowledge, maybe I'm missing something. I would hope you would share that with me, because the only agency I remember suing over that was the Mount Baker School District, and that was for their lost revenue. Yeah. Was there? Does anybody else remember anything? Pete, you were there at that time.
Can I ask that because of the hour that we just keep our comments to, if we're going to make comments, let's comment about the park plan. If we want to debate issues, let's let everybody comment first.
Okay.
Okay. Are you finished, Councilmember Knutzen?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Weimer?
Well, I agree with what other folks have said, that it's important to kind of lay out why you're voting one way or another, and I don't think it'll be any big surprise that I'm voting in favor of this, and I'm going to try not to be long-winded because I think we've set through enough of that. We've talked about this for 6 years now. We've heard from the elected officials that have authority around the lake that they're all in favor of it. We heard from DNR here themselves 2 weeks ago right in this room saying they hear that there's a demand for recreation here, that they hear more from people from Whatcom County than anywhere else in the state, the need for recreation. Some of that's off-road vehicle, but a lot of it's not. We heard from a number of people, mountain bike businesses, other businesses, lots of business owners, how the area will provide significant direct and indirect economic development opportunities. We heard from a group of economists from Western Washington University just today in a long letter explaining how this park can help grow our economy. And to top it all off, the park happens to surround the drinking water source for a majority of the people of Whatcom County. It's not a huge water quality impact, but there is some protection, added protection of moving forward with this park to help reduce and prevent more pollution from ending up in the lake. I think the main reason I'm voting for this, though, is I think my favorite comment of the whole evening was a wise fisherman who, it appears, has left the room now, came up and said, parks represent love and happiness. And I think that's the main reason I'm voting for this. We have a lot of things we're going to have to fund in the next few years. A jail. I don't think I'm going to take my wife and daughters for a walk around the jail. That's not love and happiness. Courts. We're going to build a new courtroom. It's going to cost us millions of bucks for a new judge. I hope I'm not walking with my daughters up in the courtrooms. So there's lots of things that the government does that are probably higher priorities than parks. But parks, Lily Point, Point Whitehorn, Squires Lake, that's where I go with my kids and hopefully my grandkids someday, and they represent love and happiness, and that's why I'm voting for this.
Well, I'll comment. And I want to say that coming onto the council just really a mere 3 years ago, this has been a very wild ride for me to get to tonight. And I have looked under every stone. I believe I've looked under every stone and sat down with our parks director and held him hostage for over 2 hours, asking him page after page after page of questions that I've heard from the community and the questions that I had myself. And I'm prepared to vote tonight. But before I let you know, because I know that's the big suspense, I want to talk about a few things that, like, Councilmember Mann noted, we sit up here and we listen and listen and listen, and a lot of times we just want to blurt out, that's not true, or you're a little off on that, or right on. So I'll echo some of the things that other council members have said. We all know that this does not have a significant impact on our drinking water. This may, as Councilmember Kremen noted, provide some small additional protection, but this is not going to solve our drinking water problem. Believe me, if it would, I'd be all over it, because that'd be a magic bullet. But it's not our magic bullet for Lake Whatcom. So we're going to have to keep working on that. I also found out in my investigation process that old-growth forests don't just magically grow unless you want to give them 500 years. So if we want to have old-growth forests, we're going to have to do some selective logging. We're going to have somebody that understands old-growth forests, a forester, help us with that. I want to say that today's timber practices do not create the same issues with slides as they may have in the past. They've improved their practices, and to malign the timber industry for creating slides or potential slides, I think is unfair. I am not in support of giving control of this area to any outside agency. I think Whatcom County can and should manage it. Like Councilmember Crawford mentioned, we're not proposing a tax increase, and I wouldn't support a tax increase for this area. The land is still going to remain in commercial forestry. And I'm going to work and recommend that in areas where it might be appropriate to garner some revenue from timber, that we do that. It's going to be something that is under our local control. And if we're able to do that in some areas, we'll be able to keep all of the money. It won't go to the state and be divided up amongst the state funds. And the state actually keeps most of that timber revenue. That was another interesting piece of information that I wasn't aware of. DNR is also not the magic bullet. I've heard a lot of people say DNR came with a plan and a proposal and a plan and money. Well, as you've heard already, they don't have any money. They have to ask the legislature for money. They might get money. Assuming they do, they have not selected Whatcom County as a county that they're for sure going to plan in, as far as I've heard. Maybe there's information that's come in today. We do rank high, and I will grant that. And I think that if they do get money, that we have a good possibility of DNR coming into our county. But they're coming in to do a planning process. The planning process they described was very good. And I asked our parks director, what's the planning process about? Why don't we have that? He said, we will do that. And that's a very general standard planning process that governments use for parks. And that's the intent to do here. That means all of the public will be involved. I'm going to expect that we have public outreach, that we have public information sessions, that the public gets to put input into what this area looks like. that the public is, part of the advisory group that creates this park plan. It will go through a very rigorous process of review and SEPA review. It'll go through the Parks Commission. It could go through the Planning Commission, I believe, if the council so chose. It will have a very rigorous review, and you all will get to participate in that. And that is where we say what kind of activities we want in it, what we want to do with it, what its purpose is, where the trails go, and that's where we create all of this stuff that we've talked about. But you can't do that until you have control of the land. And that was hard for me to get my head wrapped around. But you can't do all that planning process. It's expensive. It's time-consuming until you know that you've got control of the land, because it'd be like going in and getting bids to remodel a house before you bought it. You go in, you look at the house, you say, yeah, this could work. We'll have to probably do this. We'll have to probably put in a new sink. We'll have to probably work on the foundation over here. But you don't go get all the bids and start, that process till you actually buy the house. And that's not, we have to buy it to find out what's in it. I know that's a fun phrase to throw around, but I think that there's been a lot of research done on what this is about. And I think that the risks are known and the benefits are known, and now we need to put it together and make it something that Whatcom County can be proud of. The timber issue, the land was reconfigured. That was the vote we took last summer, so that the prime timber was taken out of this area. This is the area where the steep slopes are, the unstable slopes are. There is still some potential for timber in there, and it depends on who you talk to, between 2,200 and 4,000 some acres, 4,500 acres. But the majority of it is the area where you wouldn't want to log anyway. It's the area where the landscape plan wouldn't allow you to log. I want to promote, as I said before, logging the areas that make sense and thinning it and helping it grow into an old growth forest that's healthy. I want somebody in there looking for disease management and all the things that have been brought up as concerns. We talk about county funds and, spending money on the park when we have other priorities. That's true. We do have other priorities. We have to build a jail, and we have employees to pay, and we have the lights to keep on, and the county needs to and can do all that and still manage this land. We've got about 66 to 70 funds. It fluctuates depending on how projects start and finish. And many of those funds are dedicated, and you can only use the money for certain projects. We're using one of those funds that's got a huge balance in it to help fund this. We're not taking employees' money to fund it. We're not taking jail money to fund it. We're using Conservation Futures money and the revenue from the towers to fund it. Like Councilmember Brenner said, the landscape plan is the most restrictive in the nation. And I say that because I want to make sure we're not maligning our timber industry here. We need our timber industry to be strong here. We need our other businesses to be strong here. And we need to look to invite and promote as many different types of businesses here, or we end up like a lot of communities ended up when the recession hit, and they relied too heavily on one industry. It's kind of like diversification. When you invest, you don't put all your money in the same stock. You put your money in a bunch of different stocks so that if one area takes a hit, you still got your others to hold you up. Recreation, we've heard from many, many groups that recreation is, a prime industry to bring into Whatcom County and promote. This will help do that. I want to say that These are the things I want to make sure happen. I want to make sure we have local control of this resource. I want to make sure it remains commercial forestry and that we allow timber harvest in appropriate areas. I want to look to see if we can allow off-road vehicle use in the area, recognizing it might not be possible, but I want to see if it is possible. I want to make sure we retain all the rights and resources in the county, and I want to encourage the use of volunteers to keep our costs down. I want to make sure we consider locating the trailheads and parking lots outside of the watershed and off of our small 2-lane windy roads. I'm not going to support any new taxes for this park. It's got to pay for itself. And as I said earlier, I'm very interested in looking at the model that Anacortes has for selling the conservation easements and raising a big pot of money that we can then use to fund this park. I don't think I'm going to be as eloquent as some of my fellow council members, but I am a visionary, and I can see that although right now there's many of us that are opposed to this and many of us that are for this, I think that we work together and we make this the best thing that we can for us, and we make sure we stay engaged in the process, and I am going to support the reconveyance. All right. It's 11 o'clock, so does anybody else wish to speak? Councilmember Mann?
I just want to commend your skill in running this meeting tonight.
Oh,
just
thank you.
A lot of people, a lot of emotion, and just you did a great job managing all of it, so credit to you for that.
Thank you. Oh, Councilmember Kremen, make
Chair,
it quick.
By the same token, I think that all the people that were here and that have already left should be commended as well. I know that passions run very deep on this issue, and you all really behaved and conducted yourselves very civilly, and I appreciate that. And again, I also I think you had something to do with that as well. Even though you say you've only been on 3 years, you're a quick study, and you chaired the meeting like a pro, and everyone should be commended. If I may...
He wouldn't have said that if you hadn't said you were voting for the reconvention.
No, yes, I would. I would. Madam Chair, can I share a tidbit of information that I neglected to offer? This isn't a speech. It is. I just want to share with you. I asked staff earlier today to tabulate all of the correspondence that the County Council has received since January 3rd of 2012. So just a little over 14 months, the Council has received 996 total emails. And of that 996, now I didn't do this because I wanted staff to do it, because I didn't want it to appear to be biased in any way, and the fact that I'm not that computer savvy. Out of the 996, there were 771 emails expressing support for the reconveyance and 225 against, which is very close. That's a little over 77%, which is real close to that 74% that you've heard from the survey that was mentioned earlier tonight. I wanted to share that with you and the media.
Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll? It's a resolution. All right. So we're ready to vote on the resolution. Councilmember Kremen's unamended motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, that motion passes 5-2. Councilmember Brenner and Knutzen opposed. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.
That's okay.